When people ask me what I do and I say I'm an actuary, there's the conversation goes one of two ways. Either they get really excited and tell me that they have a friend, cousin, brother who does that, or it's a blank stare and an awkward pause while they sit there and decide, was that worth asking about? How long was she going to spend telling me about that? So tonight I have 5 minutes, I have been told. So my journey into math wasn't about a particular person encouraging me to do it, so much as nobody really told me I couldn't. You mentioned my grandmother. My grandmother had been good in math and science, and the family lore kind of went that she had actually kind of caused problems in the community for a girl to be this good at math and science, but that was back in that day. And so by setting that context of back in that day, when I was growing up in the 80s, I was like, oh, things have long since changed, right? So outside of that, I really was just sort of vaguely aware of some females who had done math. I had one friend whose mother was an ophthalmologist, and I knew that she had an undergraduate degree in math. Never really talked to her about it. I just knew that it had happened. I also had one other friend who said, I'm thinking about being an actuary because I have an aunt who's an actuary. So just sort of random acquaintances with that. So I went off to college with going after a degree in business. That lasted half a semester. I switched to history with looking with like a German minor is what I did next. So that lasted maybe 3 semesters. And then that's when I switched into math. I was a little bit tired of writing papers and thought, what else could I do? So when I was going into math, I didn't really know much about STEM careers. I didn't know what options were out there. So I had this story in my head of my friend whose aunt was an actuary, and it was something about statistics. So, fortunately, Google had just kind of come on the scene. And I went out and Googled actuary and poked around a little bit, found out that UNAM had an actuarial student program. And I was going to college just about 30 minutes from here. So I got in my car, I drove down, I parked in front of the building. I looked up and I said, all right, I guess I'll work there. And 12 years later, I'm still there. So I didn't really know exactly what I was getting into. I think I got the wool pulled over my eyes a little bit when I showed up for my first day and they sat me down and there's my computer and they're like, and now you're going to learn how to program, which was a little terrifying to me because I didn't know how to computer program, and it was the nerd boys in school that had done that. But I actually turned out that I actually really enjoyed it, and I was really glad that I, had a job where they just said, and there you go, do it. So it was a good experience. So what is it that actuaries actually do? So fundamentally what we do is we manage risk. We work with organizations planning for the future. Primarily old school is insurance companies, but actuaries are also out there in many different aspects, anything that involves kind of looking into the future. So, environment with climate change, working for the government, just a real variety of fields. But again, I'm in a much more traditional role as a pricing actuary at an insurance company. So in order to be successful as an actuary, you really need to stay up to date on a really broad variety of topics. So the environment is constantly changing. So, what you're doing is you're pulling together and evaluating historical data, and then you're taking all of these things that you know about the interest rate environment and what the competitors are doing and this whole world of regulatory changes and everything else, and creating assumptions and producing financial models to look out into the future. So with the exception of my 5-year-old daughter, I don't think many kids grow up thinking, hey, I'm going to go work at an insurance company, right? It's firemen or policemen are a little more popular. But I'm actually very proud to do the work that I do. We have Tom Watson as our outgoing CEO, and he's been there for most of my career. in that role and has just done a really fantastic job of talking about what a noble business that we're in. You talked about wanting to do really meaningful work. I appreciate that as an actuary, I get to do really meaningful work. Unum, as some of you may know, is primarily a disability insurer. So at this point in time, when people are experiencing tremendous physical issues and problems, we're there to help ease the financial burden of that. And it's really fulfilling to know that you're contributing to that, particularly as an actuary, because our role is, from the pricing side, make sure that we're adequately providing policyholders an appropriate amount of money back in the form of claims payment. So actuaries have a real obligation to the policyholders. And then we also have obligation to the policyholders in the long term. Other actuaries that are we call them valuation actuaries, they're the ones who are making sure that we're setting enough money aside so that when these promises that we sell, the contracts that we sell, when they come due, when you actually experience that hardship, that we're able to have the money so that we can cut you that check. So, from that side, sometimes you're in the nitty-gritty of, this number and why doesn't that match this and all of that sort of deal. But, in the big picture, it's really important to be doing something that's meaningful and helpful to people. So, to become an actuary, you have to pass through a grueling exam process. It is rough. Everyone who has gone through it is like, man, I don't know if I would do that again. Our current chief actuary, every once in a while I'll pass him in the hall and he'll tell me about the nightmares that he still has about failing an exam, and how rough that is. But once you get to the end of it, and if you persist to work hard, you will get to the end of it. You're rewarded with a solid paycheck and good job security. And there really is a huge demand for people who love problem solving, particularly for those who can integrate some solid communication skills with their technical skills. And so if you're interested in learning more, you can go out, check out Google, beanactuary.org, still chock full of actuarial propaganda. Progress that we've made, I just wanted to throw this in. When I was hired, they hired 9 boys before they hired me a friend. But 3 of our last 4 hires, we hired 2 a year in Chattanooga, 3 of our last 4 have been females. And so very excited to see that, that dynamic happening and some improvement from that front. So.